Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lee Glazer, and it's a pleasure to be talking to all of you this afternoon with my colleague Maya Fu about some of our efforts to bring curation into the digital realm. And just as Rick Powell talked about, using digital media to revitalize student work in the classroom, we have used digital media to revitalize an iconic object in the Freer Gallery, one that can't travel. The Peacock Room, of course, is always in situ, one that presents certain interpretive problems, and in a way has been burdened by its iconic status and has been treated in some respects as a kind of static monument to aestheticism. And so we found that taking the Peacock Room digital provided one avenue for overcoming the stasis of the period room. Now, the project actually started in 2010 when I began to plan the reinstallation of the real Peacock Room in the museum. Of course, it's James McNeill Whistler's famed decorative interior. And I decided to reinstall it to its appearance in 1908, a later phase in the room's history, post-Whistler, when the room served not as a dining room in a Victorian mansion, which is how it had begun its life, but rather in 1908 it was an aesthetic laboratory in the Detroit home of our museum founder, Charles Lang Freer. Filled with more than 250 ceramics from all over Asia, the room allowed Freer to explore his belief in artistic points of contact, as he put it, between East and West. The room subsequently moved from Detroit to Washington, D.C. after Freer's death, and it's been permanently on view in the Freer Gallery since 1923. So in conjunction with this reinstallation and in an effort to make the room and its dynamic cosmopolitan history, which I felt had been somewhat lost, to make that dynamic history more widely understood and more accessible, the museum partnered in 2010 with Wayne State University in Detroit. Why Wayne State? The Freer House is actually now part of their campus. And over the last decade or so, it's been transformed from a pretty dreary suite of drywalled offices to something not quite as beautiful as it was when Freer lived there, but that you can at least imagine that it was this sort of aesthetic haven that Freer created for himself. The space where the Peacock Room was housed, however, remains an incredibly dreary, barren office space with poured concrete floors and no decorative elements. And so Wayne State was quite interested. They were quite interested in working with us to re-envision the room as it had looked in Detroit. And so that was how we got started on these conversations. Essentially what we did was we worked with them to create a digital archive and an interactive website entitled The Story of the Beautiful, Freer, Whistler, and Their Points of Contact. WSU's team of digital librarians and immersive learning specialists provided the technical expertise. They really built and designed the site. And as the curator of American art at the Freer and Sackler, I worked together with Maya and some of our other staff, collections managers, photographers, and so forth, to develop the content and to direct the project team. The site launched just not quite a year ago, and it actually resides on the Wayne State server, but you can also access it through a kind of skim page on the Freer Sackler website. So the Story of the Beautiful takes its title from Whistler's idea that the story of the beautiful is already complete, hewn in the marbles of the Parthenon, embroidered with the birds upon the fan of Hokusai. Whistler and Freer, who was of course the artist's most important patron, they never strayed from this essentialist notion of beauty as a transcendent ideal. But with its multiple entry points and layered narratives, The website, we hope, problematizes this notion, suggesting that the story of the beautiful is neither universal nor complete, but that it's always being revised and rewritten at each historical moment. And so for this portion of the presentation, I'd just like to take you through the site's pathways for user engagement, which include a digital archive of more than 400 works of art and related archival materials, 2 360-degree panoramic recreations of the room, and several interactive, and I should add, highly curated narrative features. The layering of information and digital objects on the site is intended to make it appeal to a diverse group of users. We envision that people who will spend time on the site will range from the museum visitor, real or virtual, to students, teachers, and perhaps even scholars who might use some of the primary materials and some of the intriguing juxtapositions as a springboard for their own work. So the site is built, as I said, around a digital archive. And the archive is divided into 2 collections: works of art that are actually housed in the Peacock Room or have been housed in the Peacock Room. And then related archival items, letters, photographs, bills of sale, and so forth. And then these collections, these digital collections, form the basis for an immersive virtual environment. And we'll come back to that in a moment. The virtual environments show the room at 2 different moments in its history, a London version and a Detroit version. So you can explore 2 different versions of the room. And then this tab called Freer Stories provides several different ways of learning more about the faces, places, and events that are associated with the room or occurred in the same chronological time period. So there's a visual history, a kind of heavily visual timeline that links works by Whistler and aspects of Whistler and Freer's biography to other things that are going on at the time. And then a section called Freer's Travels, his world tours, his Asian tours. But let's go back for a minute here to the virtual tours. These are really, as we were building this site, these really were sort of the linchpin of the whole experience. They function as a kind of deeply contextualized way for visitors to the site to navigate the collections. All of the objects in the Peacock Room are clickable. Let's find one here. And linked to metadata, basic tombstone information, narratives, label text about the objects, and in many instances associated archival materials, photographs, bills of sale, correspondence, that kind of thing. One of the purposes of these virtual tours has to do with just basic physical accessibility. If you can't come to the Peacock Room in Washington, the web can bring it to you. And one of the really fascinating things we've discovered from analyzing user statistics is how many people from abroad are both visiting the website and downloading the app. Kind of surprisingly, China is the second most dominant user of the Peacock Room app. Saudi Arabia is up there in the stats. And so we feel like we've really fulfilled our ideal of making something that really can't be transported much more widely accessible. Let's see. Just want to go into the Detroit version of the room for a second. I mean, one of the other just sort of basic things that you can do in the VR that you can't do in real life is that when you're in the actual room, you can really only see, of course, one iteration of the room. Here you can compare and contrast two different versions. So rather than appearing as a static heirloom of the artist, the Peacock Room is a much more dynamic space on the web. The website allows for multiple presentations, and it also allows us to provide information about objects in the room that's impossible in the room itself, where there's no place to put any kind of label, let alone incorporate sort of auxiliary materials. So that just gives you an example of a particularly rich object in the room, the Princess from the Land of Porcelain, which has all kinds of wonderful correspondence about Freer's purchase of it. Photographs of it hanging at a memorial exhibition in Boston in 1904, a photograph of the model Christina Spartali by Julia Margaret Cameron. So it really enhances the depth and richness of the individual objects and situates them more fully within the context of the room. Also, I would say that one of the things that the digital allows us to do is to tell multiple complex narratives about the room's history. The stories surrounding the Peacock Room are notoriously complicated, often misstated, and the storytelling possibilities of the web seem to us to be uniquely suited to kind of untangling some of this complexity. And this section, the visual history, oops. There we go. Oops, sorry. These are essentially a series of really pretty simplistic kind of visual narratives, kind of slideshows, narrated slideshows about the life of the room in London, Detroit, and DC. So for example, if you go to the London visual history, you can learn about the room's first owner, Frederick Leyland, and see a rendering, for example, of the room before Whistler got to it, when it was in its Thomas Jekyll iteration in the mid-1870s. It was a sort of neo-rococo exercise in chinoiserie at that point, featuring brightly patterned leather wall hangings, an extensive lattice of shelving, and loads of Kangxi-era blue and white porcelain. You can look at the room in transition from Jekyll to Whistler, and then finally see its radical redecoration into a total work of art, harmony in blue and gold, the Peacock Room. So this version of the room is actually the one that has been on view at the Freer Gallery from 1993 until the spring of 2011, when we reinstalled it according to the Detroit scheme. And it's the version that you can more fully explore in the London VR on the site. One of the things that we also do on this website is to try to unpack a little bit about the meaning of Asian ceramics in a Western decorative interior. And so with that end in mind, we incorporated a section in the Freer Stories on Freer's World Tours. One of the things that's interesting is that Whistler and his patron Leyland never went to Asia. It was a tremendous, had a tremendous hold on their imaginations, but it was a place of pure fantasy for them. That wasn't the case for Freer, who really went to Asia 5 times, and many of the ceramics that are on view in the room had either come from Asia that he then subsequently purchased through Western dealers, or that he purchased directly on these travels. So making those travels kind of an important part of the story seems significant here. So let's see. Sorry. Okay, so each one of these tours includes an interactive map that charts some of the locations on Freer's itinerary. And again, the idea is to explore this notion that Freer had traveled directly to Asia, and that these points of contact between him and Whistler and Asia were very tangible, very real. And on this map, which shows his second tour of Asia between 1906 and 1907, he started, as he always did, in Detroit, eventually ended up in Egypt, and finally the trip culminated in Japan, with a stop in between in China. And it was there that he really bought for the first time significant numbers of Chinese ceramics, including this really fabulous Jun planter, which he then subsequently places in a very important position the very next year in the Peacock Room. And so one of the things that's nice about these interactive maps that link to objects in the Peacock Room is that then it can send visitors back into the room, locate the pots there, and then once they're in the room and have selected a particular object, they can add comments, they can add tags, and then users can then sort the pots by culture of origin, by where and from whom Freer acquired the object, and so forth. So this idea of commenting and tagging, which we've already heard quite a lot about, really allows users to contribute to the site and its contents, and hopefully then use that as a springboard for developing new lines of research, telling new stories. One of the other benefits is that we get new information back. We get comments from users that have allowed us to update our collection records. And shortly after the site launched, just to take one example, we got an email from a German scholar alerting us to a dating era on one of our Syrian ceramics. And so we've updated the site and updated our TMS records accordingly. So I would say that the site really, consistent with the Smithsonian's goal of creating greater access, sorry, I must be leaning on the cord here. Is it this one? So the idea is that the Smithsonian has this goal of creating greater access to unique collections, and this project really has recontextualized the Peacock Room by taking it into virtual space, digitizing it and constructing an archive, and allowing interaction at levels of detail and description that just simply aren't possible in the physical space. It also, I think, gives visitors new venues to add to the discussion of Freer's collection, Whistler's vision, and the evolving significance of the room over time. And with that idea of evolution, I'm going to hand the podium over to my colleague Maya Fu, who's going to talk to us about the next iteration of the digital Peacock Room, a mobile app.
Hello. So the evolution of the Peacock Room-related digital product continued after the story of the beautiful site, and continued in January of this year when Lee and I met with the app developer Arcade Sunshine Media to discuss the creation of an app for the Freer Gallery of Art's most iconic object. The app was published in June and is available to download for free in the iTunes Store, and this is one of the first mobile apps produced by the Freer Sackler. And if all goes well, I'm going to show you a little promo video of just the app in action here.
To mark the reinstallation of the renowned Peacock Room, the Freer Gallery has released an interactive app. For the first time ever, visitors to the museum and users at home can explore the room and call up detailed information about any of the 300 objects in the room. Both the iPad and iPhone apps feature zoomable panoramas, an interactive timeline, audio recordings, slideshows, a film about the history of the Peacock Room, and several other fun features. It's the ultimate guide to one of the Smithsonian's most celebrated treasures. Download it for free in the iTunes Store.
Yes, download it for free.
Yeah, do it now. Do it now. We won't do an encore presentation of that. So, where are we here? So I won't be offended if you all start getting your phones out and downloading it. Perhaps taking a cue from Charles Lang Freer himself, the Freer-Sackler is obsessed with the aesthetic experience. And that said, developing an app for the Peacock Room was the most obvious choice in enhancing the visitor's in-gallery experience. There was no possibility of putting a computer kiosk in the Peacock Room to allow visitors to access the story of the beautiful website. Like having labels with every object, this would really detract from the overall aesthetic experience of the room. So the Peacock Room Comes to America app allows visitors to dive deeply into the history of the Peacock Room through detailed timeline, explore each of the 254 pots, as well as the painting, the shutters, and the mural. Additionally, users can watch a video about the installation of the room, and they can curate a selection of pots, as we saw, on the sideboard and send themselves a postcard. This is an elegant way to teach the Peacock Room while providing users with an abundance of information. And after the opening screen, users will land on the Explore the Room page, which features a panorama of the room that is fully interactive and can be swiped horizontally to explore other walls in the room. Nearly everything in the room can be selected for more information, and all of the objects have tombstone information attached to them. We selected 18 objects in the room, including the shutters, the Princess from the Land of Porcelain, and the mural as highlighted objects, which you can see here. They're the sort of blue rectangles around the objects. Each highlighted object has a short label, and some have an attached photo gallery for related images in the collection and in the archives. We reappropriated some of the audio from the acoustic guides that were available in the Peacock Room from a few years ago. In this example for the mural, users can listen to the Quarreling Peacocks, featuring the voice of our British Museum director, Julian Raby, as the voice of Frederick Leyland. In other examples, the chief curator and curator of Islamic art, Masameh Farhad, and the curator of ceramics, Louise Court, discuss Rockaware and Korean ceramics in the room. But moving back to the main panorama screen, users navigate to another section by selecting options on the bottom menu. Another feature on the app is the interactive timeline, which is organized chronologically by location in the Discover the History section. And here, you can see a screenshot for London in 1870, and each thumbnail image can be selected for tombstone information, and some images include a brief description. And this is just another example showing the timeline in Detroit in 1892. One of my favorite parts of the app is actually a 5-minute video, which features interviews with Louise Court, and our Freer Collections manager, Tim Kirk. The installation of the Peacock Room Comes to America is described and reenacted. They also discuss the story of the opening of the shutters, which we do every third Thursday of every month. And another part of the app, which I think kind of got a rise out of everyone, is the postcard feature, which allows users to curate the sideboard in the Peacock Room. And users can select the pots at the bottom of the screen and drag the pots to the sideboard, which can hold up to 6 objects. And since there are many people who love the blue and white installation in the Peacock Room, we've given users the option to also select the Kangxi blue and white porcelain as well. But it is really our hope that visitors to the Freer will download this app at home on their iPhones and iPads and bring these devices with them when they visit the Peacock Room. iPads with the app are available in the Freer for visitors to check out for free, and we've been distributing iPads since September. Visitors, docents, and friends of the museum have responded enthusiastically to having this technology available. And Lee and I have also given a few demos of the app in the Peacock Room on the 3rd Thursday when the shutters are open and when there's usually a very large crowd. Many of the older visitors are quite inquisitive and initially hesitant to check out the new technology, but when they see other visitors or even staff using iPads, they're more likely to run to the front desk and check out an iPad themselves. And we're currently gathering data on the usage of the devices by looking at the checkout logs that we keep at our front desk. And it seems as though visitors are using the iPads for about at least 30 minutes during their visit. And even docents have reported that using the app, particularly with school groups, has been effective. It helps in sort of directing the students' attention towards specific objects within the room. And although the app and the website overlap in terms of content in many respects, each technology achieves something different. The slick interface of the app is more simplistic than the website and more restrictive. Although the app is more technologically advanced than the website, there is no opportunity for the user to expand upon the material presented in the app, and research possibilities are quite endless on the website, while the digitized Peacock Room-related objects kind of seem immovable within the app. While the website allows people to share objects, search for them, and even download images, the app's contents are really not up for discussion per se. And the app simply presents the various histories of the Peacock Room in an attractive and easy-to-follow format.
So just sort of following up on Maya's remarks, I think it's interesting in thinking about this presentation, it got us thinking about the kind of iterative nature of digital products and digital curation, which isn't really something that happens when you're curating a show with real stuff. And so just as the website spawned its slicker cousin, the app is now becoming the basis for a pilot project by Google, who's working with us to develop a Peacock Room mobile feature similar to those found on its historic monuments site. So yet another iteration of the digital room, which will undoubtedly reach an even wider audience, although we'll have much less control over it. Indeed, as I said, one of the distinguishing characteristics of digital curation is its iterative nature, the way that the fundamental database can be repackaged and repurposed for various platforms. Each iteration, we've discovered, has its own intended or ideal audience. For the website, I think we really envision kind of a serious undergraduate, perhaps, or an enthusiastic amateur who wants to go beyond the confines of the room itself, and we hope use all of this additional material to construct new narratives, to make new connections. The user of the app, on the other hand, who we really thought of as somebody standing in the gallery just frustrated by not knowing what all these pots they were looking at were. Now, as an aside, I will say that we've had many more downloads of the app than we have had in-gallery users so far, which is kind of interesting. But the user of the app, whether in the museum space itself or at home, has a much more tightly constructive virtual experience. Rather than reaching outward and suggesting kind of an endless network of complicated interconnections, the app really keeps the user more or less tethered to a single presentation of the room. Another important difference between the website and the app is that the app was created by commercial contractors. Its sleek look and feel is the result of proprietary software, and the contractors, while they were really enthusiastic and eager to please, were much more focused on deliverables than on hashing out epistemological questions with us or finding creative solutions to technological or curatorial problems. So the website, while sort of clunkier and less visually elegant than its mobile counterpart, It was created using open source software that was adapted to suit the aesthetic and narrative demands of our project, and it developed in a fairly organic way, I have to say. It was a genuine research partnership, and our teammates at Wayne State were especially interested in working through technological responses to the aesthetic narrative demands that the Peacock Room suggested. They had developed a number of digital collections for Wayne State, but never any that had to do with works of art per se, and that had kind of carefully curated narrative elements along with the digital collection. So by recontextualizing the Peacock Room through digital media, we, meaning Maya and I, one of the most rewarding things about it, besides having the Peacock Room in our pocket all the time, was that we were able to really expand our professional reach and kind of go beyond the museum and the departments within the museum and into this new realm of digital humanities. So by sharing the Peacock Room's dynamic history with our colleagues in other disciplines and with a worldwide audience, we hope that we'll inspire many subsequent users of the site, future users of the site, to become our active partners and add their own new chapters to this unfolding story of the beautiful. Thank you.
So maybe we have time for just 1 to 2 questions now. Michael Lobel.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly Quinn. Thanks to all the speakers for the presentations. I have a question for Richard Powell. And it's an extremely practical question because I'm someone who teaches art history as well. And after your presentation, I emailed a curator at our campus museum, the Neuberger, with a link to your site saying, this is an interesting idea. But the practical questions, you know, because I've taught art history for a while, I saw the very elegantly written pieces your students wrote, and I thought, okay, how much editorial intervention did you need to put into the project? And also, because obviously most campus museums are pretty invested in controlling what gets put on their websites, how much editorial control and feedback did the museum sort of put on the project?
Two great questions. My immediate answer to the last one is that I was very lucky with the Nasher in the sense that they have faith in this project and had faith in this project and pretty much did not impose their kind of oversight on it. They pretty much let my class and I do what we wanted to do. But you did pick up on the requirements of a good editorial eye when, and I would say that this would be the case in any kind of curatorial situation, whether it's in a university setting, in an online setting, or in an actual museum. Someone does have to read and pull out the thesaurus and really kind of help shape and make a text usable for a wider audience. One of the things that I didn't mention to you in my presentation is that I really underscored to my students that they should write in a very kind of clear way for the public in mind. And I admit I did have to spend some additional time with some writing, but interestingly, a lot of the writing, the students really kind of rose to the occasion and really were quite articulate. And I tried, the other thing is I worked really hard not to impose my take on these works and really to let them kind of give their particular interpretations of the works. And that required restraint on my part, but I think in the final analysis it was really important for their voices and their visions to really assert themselves with a little editorial help.
Thank you. Thanks.
Susan Garfinkel.
I seem to be full of questions. This is a much longer discussion than can be had here, but two things Lee said I think are worth just bringing up. You used the phrase digital curation, and you also alluded to the level of control and slickness that various outside entities bring to this stuff. I just wanted to point out that in the world of libraries especially, and in digital preservation, that the term digital curation means something very different than what I think it means to most people in this room. It means taking care of all the little bits of the data and making sure that the integrity of the data on the hard drive continues over the next 5 years and all that kind of stuff, and seems to be largely devoid, although it's changing a little, devoid of the content of the stuff, which is exactly what you're doing.
Well, I'll let you finish in a minute, but that was sort of, I don't want to call it the challenge, but that was sort of something that both sides had to come to terms with with the collaboration with Wayne State, because their definition of digital curation and the kinds of digital collections they had created and continued to take care of were what you've described. Mm-hmm. And so, when they would bring us sort of draft versions of pretty much anything early on, Maya and I would say, it looks so library-ish. It didn't have that sort of art museum look. And so their idea of, you're exactly right. We were talking about curation in two very different senses. And the site still, that's the reason, one of the reasons that it resides on the Wayne State server is that they are in a much better position than we are at the Freer-Sackler to take care of the data. So while we shape the content, they really curate what's behind it.
No, that's great. All I wanted to say is I think art historians, material culture scholars, museum people, curators of all kinds need to claim digital curation.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Susan, for calling that to our attention. And I also just want to underscore the potential work that can be done when art historians and curators and professors work with librarians, and the tremendous kind of possibilities, especially for people who are located on college campuses who are looking for partners. The partners may be found in your library system. And that's, I think, something for us really to think through. And we in the archives take that seriously also. What does that mean to be a kind of partner? What are the terms that we need to learn, the language that we need to learn to try and negotiate and make those partnerships more productive and more fruitful? So thank you, Susan, for calling that to our attention, and thank you for talking through that. I promised lemonade and iced tea and some cookies, and I do want to follow through on that. So if you thank me yes, thank me. But please, if you would thank our speakers for this panel. So then let's come back in 15 minutes. And so I'll just come through the lobby and rally people, but have something to drink, do a yoga headstand, nature's cup of coffee, and come back in for our final and really promising panel about publishing. I want to get my website up.